Hi there, and welcome to the 66th OctoPrint on Air. I'm your host, Gina Heuske, and as always today I'm going to talk to you about what I have been up to the past weeks since the last one of these, and what the next steps will be in my journey to make OctoPrint better and better. Yeah, so let's jump right in what I've been up to. You might remember that in the last episode, I told you that my summer vacation was coming up, and with it also an event that I was going to join, What Hackers Yearn 2025. And I'm happy to report that I indeed spent almost a week in the middle of a field in the Netherlands with a couple thousand of other nerds. There I met a fellow GitHub star there as well. Hi Heidi, if you're seeing that. And that was a pretty amazing experience because that was the first time that I was actually able to meet someone else from this group in the real world. And yeah, our Datenswerk deployment also worked well with all 10 gnomes happily measuring environmental data across the whole event area for most of the event. I met some users. I tried my hand at karaoke for the first time, froze my ass off during the nights as well, and took some nice pictures too. Oh, that's wrong. That's right. Okay. So as you can see, that was a quite colorful event with fire as well. And they even named the street after myself. Well, probably not after myself, but someone else with the same first name. There was also an opportunity to grill mushrooms, right? Not mushrooms, but that stuff. And speaking about the data gnomes, this is one of our gnomes sitting here on the railing of one of the bars where it was measuring environmental data for the whole event, actually even powered instead of just having batteries. So that was kind of nice. That was the entrance. As you see, lots of fire, and I even found a nice glowing fox somewhere on there. Yeah. And once I got back at home, which I was actually kind of glad to be because of the whole situation with the cold nights and everything, I was greeted by a broken network situation here at home because my router had completely died. That was not fun, so I took that as a reason to finally upgrade my hardware and rework some bits of my home lab. And apart from why and that unplanned kind of work, I spent my time off mostly with reading. I'm currently making my way through the Murderbot series. I still am actually, so I started that during my vacation, but I'm still in the work. And gaming, I'm currently on a point and click adventure spree. Personal strong recommendation for my personal game of the year, The Drifter, came out recently and is an absolutely amazing point and click adventure that you really should check out if this is your kind of stuff. I also did some crafting again, some more HTV vinyl experiments, which I did here. For example, to make a Dead Space inspired shirt for my partner's birthday. And I also did some resin stuff again and finally created myself custom buttons for my Steam Deck as well, now even with a D-pad, which I created a mold for. And this is how I spend my vacations. Yeah, so in case you didn't know that I'm weird, now you have proof of that. Okay, but once I was back from this desperately needed break and time off to recharge, I finally did the branch migration that I mentioned that I wanted to do. This has been brewing for a while, actually. For the longest time, I wasn't really happy that the names of the branches that I was working on, so the Git branches that OctoPrint is organized in, didn't really match their use anymore. For example, I did most of the development work on a branch called maintenance the past few years. And there was also a whole zoo of additional branches for release stuff, which was kind of weird and overly complicated and not something that most people, not me, would probably want or be able to wrap their head around. Frankly, most of the days I couldn't myself. So that needed to get streamlined, and I started planning for that back in, I think, January or February of this year, and then also did some prep work already in 1.11 so that updates would still continue to work even after the rename. And then I finally now did it, I think on my second day or so back from my vacation. And things are now way more streamlined than they were before. We now have a main branch, which is basically just the current stable release plus any changes since made to the documentation, CI-related test or GitHub meta files. That was basically just previously that was called master. That was just a rename. What changed though is that we now only have one single development branch, which is dev. No difference between maintenance and devel anymore. We now only have dev. And dev is where all the action happens, where I currently prep 1.12.0. And that's also now the default branch. So what you see when you go on OctoPrint's GitHub repository right away, and what also acts as the default target for pull requests that people send in, and where you also see what you also see as last activity on the repository. So this now better reflects the development side of things, that being the default. And it also is like the only place where the next big release is being prepared. No split between various development branches anymore that I then have to merge back and forth all the time. I also added a bug fix branch, or rather renamed it from staging maintenance, which was a weird mouthful. Staging bug fix, sorry. That is where any preparation for potential bug fix releases takes place. So, for example, anything that will go into a 1.11.4 at the time of recording this, which would be the next bug fix release, if it happens, will go into this branch. And everything that happens in there, of course, also gets merged back into dev. So it will also definitely go into the next release, full release. And then we also have now the next branch, and this branch is reserved for, basically the preparation of the first release and any further release candidates of a pending new stable full release. So, for example, the first time that I will push out a release candidate for 1.12, this is when this next branch will get updated. Then the dev branch will turn into 1.13.0 dev. And all further changes that I will do in the progress of the whole RC phase to 1.12 will then happen on the next branch. And the RCs will also get tagged on the next branch. So that is the idea here. And then we also have some work in progress kind of branches that might show up and pop up in the repository from time to time. Anything prefixed with bug are fixes under development that will be merged into the bug fix release. So into 1.11.4 at the moment, or what is going to be 1.11.4 at the moment. Regression will be anything that I have to prepare for a new RC, and which will then be merged into next. And work in progress, or WIP, is changes that are under development that will be merged into the dev branch. For example, my work on the alternative COM layer that I've been working on since the start of this year now lives in WIP/alt-com. Then there are also some leftovers that still need migration or deletion, and that is also what I'm doing as I go. But all in all, this is now migrated and should hopefully not cause any problems with future updates. At least the first stable release of 1.11.3 that I did since the migration has worked flawlessly against the new branching model. And I also put out a blog post about this as a heads up for anyone of you who has checked out OctoPrint from source, because that means you will have to change some things, but all of that is outlined in the blog post that you can find on octoprint.org/blog. So I did this around 3 weeks ago now. and I can say that already it has definitely made a very positive impact on my day-to-day development experience. It just alone with only having to type 3 or 4 letters for the most used branches that I switch back and forth in between, and like dev is way shorter than maintenance, which I also constantly did typos in. So that alone is worth a lot. And main is also 4 keystrokes, whereas master with 6. So yeah, that is a lot of saved typing there. Yeah, and I also, as I mentioned, I also already did the 1.11.3 release against this new branching model, which I released on September 9th. And the biggest changes in there probably were a fixed security vulnerability that was reported to me on August 24, which was basically, the problem was basically that it was possible to upload a file with a specifically crafted file name, that if you also had an add file system command event handler configured that contained the file name as a parameter, would then allow arbitrary command execution. So you would basically give your file name a name that would, when injected into the executed command in your event handler, would lead to a command being executed that you, as the attacker with upload permissions, were able to define. And that is, of course, bad. It required the attacker to have upload permissions. So that limits the attack surface already, because, well, you hopefully won't have a random attacker coming across your instance be able to log into it and upload files. And you also hopefully don't have your instance publicly exposed on the internet where some random guy could run past it and try their luck either. So, yeah. But still there is an attack vector there, and so that got removed. For now, I fixed it with more aggressive escaping, but it showed me a general problem with the way I implemented these system event handlers. Because so far they ran in a full shell, which has the advantage that if you configure a command to execute, you don't have to know the full path, for example, because the shell will look up the path for you and do that and call the hopefully right command that way. The problem is that this also allows things like chaining commands together, and this is where something like the aforementioned vulnerability can put its claws in. Therefore, what I did is I now added an optional parameter shell to the definition of system command event handlers that currently still defaults to true, which is the behavior that we so far had, that they will be run inside a shell, so basically. But if you explicitly set that to false, the command will not be run in the shell, and that will make it way safer to use. And the default behavior of this shell parameter will change in 1.13.0 as well. So currently nothing changed in your definitions. If you have system command handlers defined in your config YAML or through the included event manager plugin, that those will have shell set to true. But if you do that explicitly and set it explicitly to false now, that would be good. Because first of all, it would increase security for you already, and second of all, starting with 1.13.0, things will default to shell equals false. So if you don't make an explicit decision now, it will be made implicitly for you with 1.13.0, and that might break your event handler. So rather check them now if everything works like it should with shell set to false, which you can do in the event manager. There's a little checkbox that you can now uncheck there for your event handlers, and that should solve that and not cause any issues for you come 1.13.0. And if you have no clue what I was just talking about, because you don't know what event handlers are and what system command event handlers are either, then don't worry about that. You were most likely not even remotely affected by this problem, and you also you don't need to do anything about it now. Apart from the security vulnerability, which is actually what prompted the immediate release, because that was classified as severity high, I also fixed a few bugs already that I had in 1.11.3 that I had been working on ever since the release of 1.11.2, basically, or that got reported since then, and that I then fixed and kept on the back burner. One of these was an unwanted side effect within the settings manager that is now also fixed. And so anything that I had already in, well, not too big changes for fixing bugs ready for 1.11, I also rolled out with 1.11.3. And I have to say that this release turned out to be a real nightmare, and not due to anything wrong with OctoPrint itself, but rather I always do a ton of testing before I roll out releases. So I have this test rig sitting here with a bunch of Raspberry Pis, which I flash with various versions of OctoPi, and starting versions of OctoPrint, and then see if the upgrade from this starting version or this specific version of OctoPi works or not, doesn't work. If it doesn't work, this means complete release blocker, and I have to figure out what is wrong. That happened a lot during the testing of the 1.11.3 release, and actually even right after 1.11.3 as well, when I tried to build an updated OctoPi up-to-date image, which then failed. And the reason for that was the PyWheels was handing out a bunch of broken packages, specifically PSUtil and Tornado. PSUtil, I think, was broken under the old Bullseye version of Raspberry Pi OS, and Tornado was broken on the newer Bookworm one. So, and this also, as far as I could see on the forum, also happened to actually affect some instances in the field, which is why I created an FAQ entry on the problem. As far as I understand, there were some build issues on PyWheels, and that caused that. And now if you're wondering what the heck is PyWheels, so PyWheels is something that is set up on basically all Raspberry Pi OS derivatives out there. So there are Python packages that have bits of, for example, C code or something else that need to be compiled first. So when you install this package, normally your Raspberry Pi will then see, there are some native things that I first need to compile locally now. And then we will do that. The problem is that this compilation can take a long while. If you've try to install OctoPrint zeroconf dependency, for example, on an older Python 3.7 based Debian or Raspberry Pi OS. So I think OctoPi 018 has this problem. Zeroconf has native bindings. These bindings need to be compiled, and on a Raspberry Pi that can take minutes, several minutes. So updates that also pull in a new version of zeroconf on these systems can take a long while. Because native bindings and the compilation of them takes such a long time on Raspberry Pis, and because Raspberry Pis especially are a very popular target for Python applications, there is now a service basically online called PyWheels that pretty much has an index of pre-built packages specifically for Raspberry Pis. So Raspberry Pi OS, and that also includes derivatives such as OctoPi, come with PyWheels as an additional package index to look up Python packages and download them from. And that saves a lot of time when installing Python applications on Raspberry Pis, but it also means that if a package on Pi wheels is broken, that will cause problems, but only on Raspberry Pis. So, and that is what happened during my my update tests. Locally on my Linux machine here, everything was working fine in my whole CI end-to-end testing and such workflows. In the cloud, everything was completely fine. But even against multiple Python versions, everything from Python 3.7 to 3.13, everything was fine. But the second that I tried to deploy it on a very, very specific OctoPi version with a very specific starting setup, things broke. And in quite spectacular ways, because the PS util problem made the whole server not even start anymore, and the tornado issue made the WebSocket break. So thankfully it was only one or the other, but still that was weird. And at first I thought I had made some mistakes. Maybe the branching model changes were to blame, or I had done some other kind of weird oopsie in the code, and then spent a couple of hours trying to debug that until I finally figured out that it was a broken package from Pi wheels. So I reported those, and that was that. And thankfully they were pulled quickly and fixed as well, but it was still a lot of stress, especially during the release time, because I found the PS util problem before I pushed out 1.11.3, but I only found the tornado problem after I pushed out 11.3, and I knew that it could cause breakage for people if they update from a very specific starting point. So I was really anxious until these broken packages were pulled, because of course if it broke something for you out there, that would be bad. So in the hopes that this no longer happens in the future, or at least gets detected right away when it happens, or more or less right away when it happens, I've done a little development work. So what I've done now is I've created a nightly canary workflow that runs every night around 2 a.m. or so. And what it basically does is it has a whole test matrix with currently 4 entries here, where it creates a minimal Docker image in which it basically mimics a Raspberry Pi, the environment found on a Raspberry Pi. So not the actual hardware, but the right CPU architecture, the right package sources, and it also enables Pi wheels therein. And then it installs OctoPrint inside this. Inside this image, dear God. And after that also runs it inside Docker and fires my end-to-end test suite against it with currently 72 tests. And then it also, inside that, it also checks the OctoPrint log, whether it contains any kind of errors. And if either a single one of these tests fails, or the OctoPrint log from the test run contains any kind of errors, the whole build will fail. And it does this both for Bullseye and Bookworm, and also for the main branch and the dev branch. So that way, the idea is that way the nightly build will fail as soon as anything breaks in the packages, not just in PyWheels, but also in the official Python package index. That would also be detected that way. And allow me to notice any kind of breakage specifically in the Raspberry Pi target environment that is not yet covered by the regular nightly, not nightly, actually daily test install of main branch and latest release and development branch and so on that I already have in place, which did not discover this particular case of problems. And I'm happy to report that this canary has already triggered once, which was actually on September 19th. And it turns out that, this was also another version of the PSUtil package uploaded to PyWheels that was broken, and that I could then immediately report when I saw this the next morning, and that then got pulled within 2 hours or so of me reporting it. So, this is definitely, I hope this is going to save all of us a lot of time and help not only OctoPrint and OctoPrint's community as a whole, but also PyWheels itself, because they obviously also don't want to push out broken packages naturally. Yeah, so the canary build. Sometimes, from problems like this package breakage, actually good things come. Because I'm quite happy with this build. Because it also gives me early warnings now against the dev branch, against any new versions that I pull in there, if any kind of breakage happens due to that. So that is really good, I think. Okay, what else did I do? Yeah, so you might have seen this note in 1.13.0, in 1.11.3, that the global API key will now be removed for good with 1.13.0. That has the global API key has actually been marked deprecated now for ages. I put in a warning about it that it should not be used, and you should instead use either a user API key or application keys inside its configuration page. I don't know, 3, 4, 5, 6 years ago or so, the problem with it is basically it is one single API key with full admin access. And in the early days of OctoPrint, that was okay and that was fine because it was not yet widely deployed as it is now. And it was also usually deployed in a safe way, but we've now seen way too much cases of where it was deployed in an unsafe way, where this kind of API key with full admin access to the whole instance is way too much of a juicy attack target to leave it like it is. So the idea here is to just drop it completely and instead finally make people use individual application keys bound to a user account, and ideally also to a specific user account with limited permissions for third-party clients. For example, your slicer does not need full admin access to upload a file to OctoPrint. It actually only needs the upload permission. So the best idea would here be really to create a limited user account to allow uploads. But I also have the idea in the future to create application keys with an additional scope where you can limit permissions further. So you could, with your own user account, create an application key that only has upload permissions, something like that. That's something at the back of my head that I would really like to do, but I haven't yet gotten around to do it. Just here as a note, this is also something that I'm thinking about. So basically the global API key will be removed completely in 1.13.0. All traces from it gone from the config and from the support of it in the authentication bits inside OctoPrint itself. And 1.12 will already prepare for that, in that the key won't get generated automatically anymore on server start, which it currently in 1.11 still is. I've also added a little health check that warns of its use if it's set. So if OctoPrint detects that you have a global API key set in 1.12, it will show you a little warning in the health check itself, and also log this to the log, and also give this in the health check summary as a fail. And I've also added a new mechanism in 1.12 for plugins to get a single-use API key to use for querying the API endpoints of other third-party plugins, because I learned that apparently there is a handful of third-party plugins out there that integrate with other plugins that way, because it's the most stable API that they could find. And so that workflow should also be covered now. And then with 1.13, I will simply strip any any leftovers, any global API key leftovers from the source altogether. Speaking of 112, that is also something that I've been working on a lot. I've improved the caching of the file metadata endpoint because I learned inside a bug report that this is apparently quite slow. I also did some. I also found a way for improved performance in the G-code viewer plugin during the analysis step, because that was doing a lot of stuff that it actually didn't need to do, because what it did there wasn't used anymore anywhere anymore. So I removed that, and now it runs way faster. And I've also prepared this particular fix for inclusion in 1.11.4, so it's actually also in the bug fix branch, not just in the dev branch. Should 1.11.4 happen. Then recently I had to do a workaround for behavior change in a recent click release, because that also broke things in exciting new ways. The base steer parameter on the command line suddenly wasn't working anymore, breaking my end-to-end tests for one, and also in general, of course, functionality as a whole. And and then I've also been working on the new COM layer and the Moonraker plugin as well. So the Moonraker plugin now can show custom controls inside OctoPrint's UI from the available macros, and for that I had to adjust the COM layer to actually pull that stuff from connectors, from printer connectors, and display it in there. And I now also have, since yesterday actually, I also have connector capability reporting in there, so that a connector can say whether it supports temperature offsets or not. For example, on the Moonraker plugin, we cannot support temperature offsets because OctoPrint will not actually stream the file itself, but rather tell Moonraker to print a file without any kind of intermittent control over it. So it's not possible to apply a temperature offset because we don't see the temperature commands on our own. So, stuff like that can now be flagged by a connector, and will then also get pushed to the front end, so it can remove certain UI functionality, so it doesn't get into the way, basically, while still being non-functional. And of course, I also ironed out some bugs as I found them. But yeah, overall, I'm making progress here on all bases, and that's really, really nice. And so that brings us to the next step, or rather to the next steps. And that will be that obviously continued work on 112. Now that 1.11.3 has been pushed out, I'm back to full focus on 1.12.0. And my primary goal continues to be to get the COM layer merge ready. There are still some things that I need to do and refactor some things to enable more features in connectors. And that is probably going to continue until 1.13 is released, but 1.12 is released. Sorry, I'm getting confused here. 1.12 is released, but and then I will also have to write documentation for all of the stuff that I did and all of the changes that I did, and also for the document the new REST API bits and pieces and how the API versioning works and all of that. So that will also be a whole bunch of work still ahead of me, but at least things are functional. I can print through this, and it's actually pretty nice coming together. Yeah. Speaking of which, I will also, of course, continue work on the Moonraker plugin. The basic development cycle actually right now is that I want to implement something in the plugin, and then I realize I can't do that yet, so I have to adjust the alt.com branch while keeping things backwards compatible. That sometimes makes things difficult here. Then once I have done that, I can implement the thing. That sometimes during this implementation, I notice that my approach isn't really working well yet, and then I have to adjust that again, and some back and forth and such. And then when I'm through with that, some new kind of extension interface is in the Alt-Cam branch, and the Moonraker plugin is making use of that. So that's really nice. And then, of course, rinse and repeat for everything that I still want to implement on the Moonraker plugin. Yeah, so that's that. And that already brings us to the end of this episode, actually. The next one of these, I think, will be in October. And I know it was a lot of technobabble today because there was a lot of technical stuff and hurdles that I had to solve with pie wheels and branching and whatnot. But I still hope it was interesting. And you still see that I'm busy as always. And yeah, with that being said, I hope we see each other again next time. And until then, stay healthy and happy printing as always. Bye.